let's get started. So the title of this talk that I put together is Unblocking Competitive Advantage as a Project Manager and Product Owner. Okay, that title sounds really long, and we'll get there, but I think there's some ground we have to cover first to make sure that we're all talking about the same things, right? So first off, software projects are a risky business, really risky business, right? There's a lot of money being spent on software projects all throughout. I've been working on these things for about 20 plus years now. And I can think of millions and millions and millions of dollars that have been spent on projects that I've been working on. And if you know anything about software projects, you'll know that over 66% of them end in partial or total failure. That's a big frickin' number. And that number is according to the chaos report that come out every year. And if you're like me, you're thinking, OMG, that's huge, right? I can't even imagine of those billions of dollars that are being spent, how much is ending in failure. Like, I can think of a whole bunch of projects that I've worked on in my career that haven't ended well. So what do we do about it, right? What have we learned about software projects and the web projects that we all do that makes this happen, right? And I think that one of the big takeaways that I've taken over my career is projects don't fail for technical or design reasons. They don't. I've been working on, like I said, projects for 20 years, and I have yet to find the project that we have not been able to figure out the tech or the design. But I can think of a bunch that failed, and they've all failed because of the people involved. Okay. So here we are, right? We've got all these projects, 66% of them fail. They're failing not because of the tech or the design, because we can figure those things out, but they fail because of the people involved. So that leads us up to a place where we end up talking about two very important roles on our projects. Those two roles are product owner and project manager. And we're going to talk specifically about these two roles today and how they interact. But what I've seen so many times in my career is it's not product owner and project manager. It becomes very quickly product owner versus project manager. And I'm going to share a couple things that I've heard over and over and over again during my career, right? I've heard this, that they just don't understand, right? I've heard both roles say this. I've heard product owners, say that they don't understand, and project managers is like, they just don't understand, right? Like, this is something that happens all the time. Like, they just don't get what I'm dealing with. Another one is everything just takes so long. And to be honest, I hear this more from, product owners about, project managers, but I also sometimes hear this from PMs talking about, like, why does everything just take so long to get the right requirements, right? And then the next thing that happens is I hear this a lot. Well, I did my job. And the implied piece of this is the other didn't do theirs. They are the reason it failed. And my favorite of all time is I actually heard this once. I actually heard a product owner say this. Well, everyone has a plan till they get punched in the mouth. And I'm sitting in this room, this was years and years ago, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, did you just quote Mike Tyson? Is that the thing we want to bring up when we're talking about this relationship and we're trying to all succeed together? And I was just like, man, this is awful. This is awful. So why does this happen? And I really think there are two main reasons why this happens to us. And one is about differing perspectives, and the second one won't surprise you. It's about money, but really it's about perspective with money. So let's go through the first one, the reasons why the first one happens. And these are things that I think are just, truths that exist, right? The first is the largest cost in software development projects are the people. Full stop, right? This is where most of the money is spent. This is where the biggest cost is, and that absolutely is the case, right? The second is the biggest risk for software projects is building the wrong thing. There is no better way for your project to not end successfully than to build the wrong thing. Okay, so now we've got the largest cost and the fact that the biggest risk is building the wrong thing. Well, then we add this little wrinkle to it, right? That idle teams cost the same as teams building the wrong thing. Uh-oh, right? So we can't build the wrong thing, that the biggest cost is people. Well, people sitting around not building anything is just cost the same as building the wrong thing. Okay, right. So the project manager in me, because that's more of my background, is the obvious answer appears to be add more efficiency, right? Let's make this more efficient. Let's just figure that out, right? Okay, so that sounds great. The PMs are happy. They're like, let's just be more efficient. Okay, but then we end up with the last truth, which is innovation and creativity are nonlinear, not efficient, and require waste. We can't solve the problems the right way while taking the most efficient route. It doesn't work that way. So I think those statements end up in a place and lead us to a place where, well, there's inherent conflict, right? Project managers are going to look for that efficiency, and product owners are looking for the creative solutions that are going to require some waste, right? So okay, cool. So what do we do? What's the other big reason, right? Well, the other giant reason has everything to do with money. Project managers are cost focused. They live in the now and use the past as guidance, right? They're looking for that predictable. They are cost focused, right? And that's cool because they are managing budgets. They are managing those things, okay? While product owners are revenue or future revenue focused. They're looking for what's happening tomorrow. They're looking for the upside. They live in the future, and they get to have and live in and be judged by the unknown, unrealized things and the promises they've made in the future. Okay, so what are we to do, right? We've got one group that's focusing, that seems like the solutions are all efficiency based. The other group is looking for innovation. One group is looking at completely cost breaks down. The other one is completely looking at potential revenue. So what are we to do about this, right? Well, I'm going to come back to this in a little bit, and I want to talk about some other things first. So let's talk a little bit about these two roles and make sure we're defining them similarly, and we can talk about the same thing. So the first off, I want to define the difference between a product owner and a project manager, right? A product owner, their job description shortly is to maximize the value of the product by continuously making choices about what to build and what not to build. Easy enough. And a project manager manages a project on a day-to-day basis and responsible for the process in which the project is run. Okay, those are fairly simple definitions, but let's dig in a little bit deeper and talk about what they're actually responsible for, right? So the responsibilities of the project manager are, they own the process. They own the budget, right? These two things are absolutely the responsibility of PMs, right? They need to track and measure project progress. They need to manage the project risks and know what they are. And a big part of their job is protecting the project team, right? They are providing air cover for the project team to make sure that they are able to keep in the work and be efficient. Okay, now, in addition to these responsibilities, PMs also have a couple realities they have to deal with, right? One, they are cost focused. And we talked about this already, but I think it's worth bringing up again. They are cost focused. They are team focused. They are often managing down, which means they are managers who don't have reporting responsibility for the people working on the project, but they're often team focused. They're looking down, right? And they often report to technical leadership, which once again, we have to mention the money. Those technical leadership roles are often cost centers, which means that of course they're budget focused because they've been given a budget to operate within, right? So that all colors in the realities for the PM, and that's what they're dealing with. Okay, let's talk about the responsibilities of the product owner real quick. Obviously, product direction, that's key. Prioritization of tasks. They have to be able to know what's being worked on and what's more important than what, right? Maximizing the value created for customers. Okay, that makes sense. They're also the main interface with a lot of the stakeholders, right? They're managing that relationship and understanding what the business needs and all of that. Now, they've got their own set of realities they operate from. Okay, some of those realities are they are potential revenue focused, they are customer focused, they are often managing up, and they often report to non-technical leadership roles. Those are often the revenue centers, right? Completely different set of rules between cost centers and revenue centers at most businesses. So another way that I like to think about this is, if we go back to our definitions, is think about, when I think product owner versus project manager, I also think about like some other things that we know about the difference between leadership and management, right? And one of my favorite definitions for describing the difference between these two ideas and concepts comes out of a book, 7 Simple Habits of Highly Effective People, Franklin Covey, is management is doing things right, while leadership is doing the right things. And I think we can take this and morph it into a definition that we can use, right? And make this really simple, which is project management is doing the right things. Project management is doing things right, or product ownership is doing the right things. Okay, so now we've defined this. Let's talk a little bit about what it looks like to work together. And I think one of the most important things that both roles need to realize and come to reckon with is you can't succeed alone. It's not possible, right? You need each other. And if we look a little bit about what is necessary to make all this work, I think we have to go back to some foundational team principles and what makes teams of humans work well together. The first is we go back to this classic pyramid, right? Excuse me. And what most people are actively looking for are results, which is great, right? That's what the top, but we have to realize that's the top of the pyramid. So what is under results, and what things do results have to sit on to be there? And those are trust, healthy conflict, commitment, and accountability. Those all have to be present, right? We can't have results unless we have each of these. And by trust, meaning we have to be able to trust each other, right? Do we talk about, do we do what we say, right? Healthy conflict, do we know how to rumble, right? And like there is this spectrum where conflict exists between healthy conflict that results in things happening and things moving forward, and unhealthy conflict where we're out to get each other. Commitment. Can we commit to the same thing and believe those things, right? And do them together. And accountability is, do we have ways to hold each other accountable, and can we hold each other accountable for what they said they were going to do? We can't have results without all of this, right? So, product owners, project managers, we have to have that relationship, and we have to have trust. And one of the things that's funny about trust and control is we try to control things that you don't trust. That's where it all comes back to this idea of trust. And you can either control people or trust people. And controlling people just does not work. It's not effective, it's not the way to move forward, and it is only ever going to be short-term results. So I think it's probably worth talking a little bit more about what we mean by trust in a business sense, right? And I think that one of my favorite definitions of trust is to break it down into 4 distinct parts. Those parts are sincerity, reliability, competence, and care. And I want to dig into these just a little bit because I think this will give us a great framework to talk about trust and how to build it, okay? Sincerity is the assessment that you are honest, that you say what you mean, and you mean what you say, right? This is really important. So being sincere is that I've said what I mean, and I've said everything that I needed to be said. That's the first part of trust, right? Reliability. You meet the commitments you make. It's also really important, right? How am I going to trust you if I don't believe that you mean and you are going to make that commitment that you've made to me, right? competence, that you have the ability to do what you say you will do. Okay? I can't trust you in a business sense unless I believe that you have the ability to do the things you will say you do, right? Like, of course, like this makes perfect sense, right? And the last piece is care. You have the other's interest in mind as well as your own. And this is one of those really, really important things here, right? Like, if you don't have everyone's interest in mind as well as their own, then I can only, even if you're competent and all of the other pieces, then I can't trust that you will make decisions that are good for us, for the project long term, right? Okay. And I think that one of my favorite analogies is for trust is the jar of marbles. And when I'm talking about the jar of marbles, I envision for like in my kids' classroom when they were little, there'd be like every time the classroom did something good, a new marble would go in, right? And the jar filled all the way up, they would get a prize or whatever. But, if the classroom was misbehaving, handfuls would come out. And I think this is a really good way to think about trust is everything we do, every action we take, every word we speak, every email we send is a marble going into the jar. And trust is built one marble at a time. But just like the jar of marbles, that everything that detracts from trust, an entire handful comes out. And I think that, like, if we look at it that way, how we show up and be intentional with our actions and all of that, will focus on putting marbles in the jar rather than the handfuls that come out. I think another really important thing to talk about in this relationship also is making clear requests and knowing what that is, right? Knowing how to, when a request is made and being specific with it. So, for example, right? Like if I'm sitting here talking to someone on the team and, I say, well, hey, it would be a really good idea if we got those requirements done by tomorrow. And the person sitting across from me, maybe it's the product owner, says, yeah, that would be cool. That'd be great, right? There's a chance that I'm leaving that interaction thinking, we both thought this would be a great idea. And they agreed. That means I'm thinking they said yes to this. And in their minds, they could be thinking, wow, we really do think that would be a great idea. It ain't going to happen, but it's a great idea, right? Like, we need to be way more explicit with our requests. They need to sound something more like this. In our case, I would be, Emily, I need this. I need the requirements by tomorrow. Can you make that happen? Now, there's two things I did there. One, I made explicit that it was going to be a request. The second thing that happened is I asked if she could commit. I didn't leave it hanging. I didn't say, this would be great. I need this by tomorrow. In order to be a clear request, there has to be both the ask and the permission for the other person to say no. Okay? This is something we can all practice. And if we listen to the conversations we're having on most project teams, we'll hear that the requests are implied rather than clear statements. I think the other thing we can do is make sure that we're speaking the same language. Those perspective differences between project managers and product owners, they create different language and they create ability for us to hear different things and tell ourselves different stories about what's going on. So being explicit, adding common language, saying when we say this is what we mean, will fix so much. It'll fix so much on any team, right? The other thing is we have to stop the scapegoat game, right? The CYA game, right? I can't tell you how many projects I've been on over the years where step one, before we even started anything, was to identify who we could blame if this went south. This never ends well. We have to stop this, right? And it happens all over the place, right? Like it's this spiral of stupidity thing that happens where I blame you, you blame me. All of a sudden we're having all of these retros and all the management involved trying to figure out exactly what happened because nobody's got the same story. So, is it really that simple to do these things, to focus on trust, to build these things? Well, yes and no, right? Like one of my favorite quotes is, "Don't confuse simple with easy." There is some simple formulas here, but none of this is easy, right? Humans need time together to build trust. We need that trust to be able to be successful on our projects. And one of the things I'm often reminded of is if you can't say no, it's not collaboration, right? We have to be able to say no to each other and to work through things and to rumble well in order for it to be good collaboration, right? And oftentimes we confuse getting along for effective collaboration. And I would say that most of the time, teams that are super getting along and never have conflict, they're not collaborating really. They've created an echo chamber and they're just rolling, right? Like this work and these different perspectives, it's going to cause conflict. The conflict isn't bad. The conflict often results in good things, right? And all this leads me to a place where I believe at this point in my career that successful projects are lagging indicators of the work we did as a team to build trust before the project started, right? All this work, this has to be done. We have to trust each other, and then successful projects are a side effect of that. So some rules to live by for project managers. Excuse me. You represent the how, right? You are the how of the project. You are the how we're going to get all this done, how we're going to design these pieces, right? You are a manager on the project team. This is an important point. You are the manager, right? Like that means you are going to make sure we do things right. You're accountable for the success of the project. And the first rule of project management, in my opinion, is no surprises. As they often say, the best surprise is that there is no surprise. It's all about communication. And remember that process and systems are for people. People over process. We have to design our systems to take care of the people who are doing the work. Process without considering people are just a waste of time. Repeatable and predictable processes are table stakes. Everybody's got them, right? That's the whole point. But what do we do with those interpersonal interactions between team members is where good things happen, right? Also, the best way to make sure your project does not hit budget, timeline, scope, the things you're accountable for, is to not talk about them. How many times have I seen people work on projects or been part of projects where it's like, ooh, I hope nobody notices that. And one of the things that I find myself saying is like, no, that's your job, is to make sure that everyone notices that, right? No surprises. And I also believe that one of the most important things we can deliver on our projects as project managers is the ability to change direction, to be wrong, right? We are all trying to figure this stuff out. We want process that can be flexible so that people can get smarter over time and make better decisions tomorrow than they did today. And I think that my beware for project managers is beware of efficiently building the wrong thing. It's an easy trap to fall into, right? Is just being like, nope, this process is running along. Here we go, building the wrong thing. Man, check out our velocity numbers while we build the wrong thing, right? Like we need to be able to not do that, right? Like this is one of the traps that we can fall into. How about some rules to live by for product owners? You represent the why on the project. If you can't clearly articulate why you are doing something, then no one can, right? You have to own this. You have to be able to represent the why on your project, the vision. You are a leader on the project team, and you are accountable for the success of the project. You should always be talking to customers. I think a large percentage of most product owners' time should be talking to customers, getting feedback, understanding what they need, understanding what they want. How do we get there, right? Understand that clarity is kindness Thanks, Brene. That we can, the clearer we can be with the project team and the project manager, the better off and the more apt they will be to deliver on those things. Obviously, they need to focus on the most important things, right? You are the rudder on the ship. You will point it at the things that need to be focused on and the things that need to be solved. And finally, my beware for product owners is beware of sunk costs. This is the biggest trap that I see with product owners is to be thinking about all of the money that was spent to get where you are and thinking the best way forward is to follow that through. And I often think about that as don't throw good money after bad, right? Yesterday's money is spent. Those costs are incurred. The best thing we can do, the most responsible thing we can do is to make sure that the next thing that's done is the right thing and continue to do that time after time after time, right? We have to have that perspective. So what does it look like to build on this trust that we have, right? Now that we've talked about some of these pieces. And I think that one of the most important things is we have to design our process for systems that build trust, right? If process is for people and people need trust, let's design our process to reinforce trust. And I think that if we look at all the things that we could do in our project and design that process, like we can point to things that build trust, right? Like defining a cadence is a great way to do it. Knowing when those feedback loops, having those demos is a great way to build trust, to clearly state what commitments the team is making and then report on those results. That lends trust to everyone who's participating, right? One of my favorite ways to do this is just to have that weekly cadence on a given day or bi-weekly, whatever it is going to be, defined and say, this is when you'll hear from us. This is when we'll publish this data. This is when you'll have your status update. And what that does is an amazing thing, right? It means that everybody who is interested in the project or want that, when you say, well, they ask, well, what's the status on this stuff? And you just be like, well, that happens on Wednesdays. And here's the place where you can find all the status that I've ever provided every single Wednesday. Those questions go away, right? They know where to get them. They know when they're going to happen. And if you've done it reliably, they will trust that it's going to happen, right? I think another thing that we need to think about is good news and bad news should travel at the same speed. And this is really hard. This is really, really hard because good news is really easy to share and bad news sucks. And if we bury the bad news, bad things will happen. It'll eventually come out, right? We have to highlight those things coming up. I think we have to, beware someone who's wearing multiple hats in this area, right? I have yet to meet the person who is an effective project manager and product owner at the same time. There is conflict that has to happen with prioritization and all of this stuff. There's a little bit of rubbiness, right? And that's okay, right? But beware somebody who's trying to do too much because I think we need two different roles doing two different things. And I think it's really important for those two roles to job shadow each other. This is one of the ways I think we could fix a lot of the animosity between these two roles is spend each time with each other and trying to see how each other is doing that role, right? And this, I think another thing to beware is not to let outsiders pit you against each other. You probably report to different management structures, so you have to be really careful that there's not your boss and your peer's boss saying well, someone's got to be responsible here. It's like, no, I can take responsibility. We'll take responsibility together, right? And I think we got to be really careful with the stories that we tell ourselves in this area, right? Especially, these two roles is because you will make assumptions and you will tell yourself a story that doesn't exist. And if you've ever been in a leadership position or a management position, you know that if you leave out details, people that are involved will tell themselves a crazy story, and it is just bananas what they will tell themselves. And I've been on some projects where people have told themselves some really, really crazy crap over the years. So just ask, right? And one of the things that I love that, Brene Brown also talks about is like, use this language. The story I'm telling myself is this. And it's a great way to add context, ask clear questions, and get answers and put somebody else where you are, right? And remember, so much of this is just building good empathy, right? And one of the quotes I love about empathy is, in order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not as you imagine their experience to be. So, at the end of the day, unity and effective teamwork, I believe, are the competitive advantage that we can use for project managers and product owners. And I realize that a lot of the stuff I've talked about is real high level and talking about trust. But I think that there's so much foundational pieces that go into this that we have to go back and think about the humans and think about how we're designing things and have a good framework that trust is the thing that we're after, that is built on top of all of the other pieces in the pyramid so that we can get results. That project success is a lagging indicator of doing all of the things that we should be doing with teamwork.